Hey, everybody. This is Scott from the Critical Breakdown. I hope you had a nice Valentine's Day. And with the Ides of March coming up, you don't want to be cursed entering spring. Let's go ahead and leave us a podcast review. You know you're going to because it's one of your favorite things to do already. So just do it, man. On iTunes, if a podcatcher has any review system, leave one there. We'd love it. And Wally the podcast dog would love it too. So leave us a review and enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to the Critical Breakdown, the podcast where we start at the bottom of Rotten Tomatoes and work our way to 100% fresh. I'm Max.
And I'm Scott. And today we're dreaming because we're talking Inception, rated 86% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I'm really mad at myself for not having the boing noise on the soundboard.
Yeah, get the call me back. Call me back when you have it added.
Yeah. We'll just scrap this week and do it next week. So
yeah. And hey, we're talking Inception because of you, the listener.
Yeah, the listeners, because of contributions to our social media feeds from viewers like you.
Yeah, we put up a poll. We gave you a few options. We tossed out a little Steve Jobs. We tossed out a little Mulan. We tossed out a little Heat. And of course, we tossed out Inception, and Inception won. Not surprising.
Yeah. It's Christopher Nolan. He's always a fresh filmmaker. People love his work. It's a great movie. People love to talk about it. It ends with an ending that has continued conversation until this day.
Yeah, that top was wobbling.
But let's just take a brief second to discuss these other ones, because we normally do a reasons we picked, which this one was you guys, and the other movies we could have watched, which we just named. So we could just dip in for a second. We both were kind of excited to see Mulan.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Mulan since it came out, probably, and I was maybe 7. So it's been a minute, and I was interested in watching because I like the music from Mulan quite a bit.
Yeah, I was also excited to see Mulan. I haven't seen it in a while. I saw it a couple of years after it came out, so I was probably already in high school or something. But
Because what is Mulan? Is that 98, 99?
Yeah, it's towards the end of that Renaissance period.
Yeah, it was before Lilo and Stitch.
And they're making a live action Mulan, I believe.
Yeah, I think casting details have come out, and they're using like actors from China and stuff who aren't really in Hollywood movies yet, which is cool.
Yeah.
Who's directing? Do you know off the top of your head?
Nikki Caro. Off the top of my head, did Whale Rider?
I don't know that one.
She did The Zookeeper's Wife and Whale Rider.
Okay.
Zookeeper's Wife was decent. It was just a little over emotional, which it's a very sensitive subject, so I get it. But there were some things I would have changed in the film. But I know people loved Whale Rider when it came out. I still never seen that one.
I can't even remember what it is.
I think it's set in New Zealand, possibly, or just in the Maori peoples. So I know that they're kind of the focus of it. So
sure.
So I think it's New Zealand, but I probably said that wrong. It's like Maori or Maori. I don't know how you say it. So my apologies.
I'm not offended.
Yeah, my apologies.
I think the Maori people will understand that there was no ill will when they listen.
I think if one of our half dozen listeners are, from New Zealand, they'll be cool with it. So
I'm sure they have a Google alert set up for mentioning, and then they'll.
That's probably more offensive than anything I said. No, I'm just kidding.
Because they're a Bing people.
Yeah, it's no.
Okay, that's offensive.
So yeah, we could have watched Mulan.
Yeah.
I remember enjoying Mulan. So like I said, we haven't really done animation or Disney animation.
We haven't done an animated movie at all yet.
Yeah. So we're kind of overdue.
Yeah.
So we were excited.
But the people clearly don't want it.
No. And I was amazed that they clearly did not want Heat.
Yeah, well, that one actually didn't surprise me. Of these 4, in my opinion, the best movie is either Heat or Steve Jobs, and they didn't get much love in the polls. But Heat isn't like a mainstream movie that I think like our podcast market is very familiar with. It's a 3.5 hour long Michael Mann heist movie from the early mid 90s.
Yeah, but see, that gets like film geeks going, so it just depends on if you're a film
Yeah,
geek or
for
not.
sure. That's why I love it. But
Yeah.
I think our podcast is not so much for film geeks as it is for just like a couple people.
Like people want us to do the geeking for them, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, they come here for our geeking.
I barely understand the sentences now, but Steve Jobs is a personal favorite of mine. Nobody really voted for it, but it's very good. I wonder if there was some confusion between Steve Jobs and Ashton Kutcher's. Was it just called Jobs?
God, probably.
I hope not. Run the poll again. Run the poll again.
I put the dates by it so that people could figure it out.
Yeah, but they came out around the same time, so
I think Jobs was earlier.
Maybe like a year or two, but like close enough that you might look at it and be like, "Oh, is that Kutcher one?" You know,
the Ashton Kutcher one was 2013,
and the Steve Jobs was 2015.
No, it's
14.
It's 15. Yeah, it's 15.
15. Yeah. Still close enough in my opinion, but what can you do?
What you gonna do?
Yeah. But then of course we have Inception.
Yeah, we have Inception. This movie, I remember, had a ton of conversation about it, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was like one of the most complex original sci-fi movies to be also a massive blockbuster.
Yep.
So that's what gets the people going.
Yeah. I'm going to be completely honest also while we transition to another segment here. I've only been watching the Olympics like the last week or so.
Yeah.
So I don't have any exciting what I've been watchings going on, but I will say it's been a fun Olympics so far. And just watching it, what I do now is I ask myself what Olympic stories would make the best movies.
Interesting.
And there's some good ones out there. Apparently there's a Nigerian, I think maybe bobsled team this year, a females Nigerian bobsled team.
I mean, come on, though. We've seen that movie.
Yeah, but we got all these remakes happening. You know, instead of doing Ghostbusters with ladies, which I'm fine with. I still haven't seen it, but I'm fine with it in concept.
Do cool runnings
with ladies, but it's an actual story, you know? You always have the returning athlete stories, like Shaun White came back and he won gold after losing hard last time. You don't got to make a Shaun White movie, but you know that story there. That's always a compelling story. The elder statesman athlete fighting for his title again. You know.
You don't have to make a Shaun White movie, but Carrot Top, stay by your phone.
Yeah. Or you know, Fassbender could do it. Just make him ginger-ish. Well, I guess he already is ginger. There, the movie's made. No.
Fassbender and Shaun White look nothing alike.
I know. I just picked Fassbender out of the blue.
Sure.
But no, you know, there's tons of fun stories. There's you have a couple figure skaters that are pretty exciting this year. And that's good. You have this ice dancing pair that have a ton of like sexual chemistry with each other. They're Canadian. Yeah, but apparently there's this whole like Canadian fandom about them because they've been ice dancing for years, and I guess all the figure skating fans in Canada like to they call it shipping. They ship them.
Yeah. So they're not actually a relationship?
No, because the American ice dancers or the American pairs figure skaters, that's it. The American pairs figure skaters are. The American ice dancers are brother and sister, I believe. So usually it's like a close friendship or relationship or you're married. But these, they're just like they've been working together forever and they look like they are when they do their ice dancing, but they're not. And so it's just like I was reading all this, like, you know, all these stupid BuzzFeed articles about it just to see what the word on the street is. And I was like, you know what, that'd be a good story right there, something with it. Like maybe they tried to be in a relationship and their skating sucked when they were, so they have to like stay in this like pseudo state and then their skating's great, you know? Like just shit like that. There's stories out there is what I'm saying.
You could get Nicholas Sparks to consult on that one.
Oh, that'd be great, yeah.
What do you call it? Like Blades Apart?
There we go.
Love on the Razor's Edge?
Ooh, Razor's Edge would be good.
Yeah.
That also sounds like a good 90s thriller, and it might be.
Yeah, it really does. Sounds like Michael Douglas was in it, and it's like a spiritual successor to Basic Instinct.
Wow, I think you just wrote my new favorite movie. Speaking of any of our fans that also geek on film might know this news already, but they've announced they're making a feature film of the short film Kung Fury, like a feature-length film, starring Michael Fassbender, funny enough. And they just announced that Arnold Schwarzenegger will be in it playing the American president.
Yep. I saw that. I think maybe I just don't get the meme of it.
I mean, I get the meme.
I've seen the short film, and I thought it was pretty stupid.
Yeah, no, it is. But it's like, it's fun stupid. It's funny stupid. I'm going to watch how this turns out, but like, I don't think there's a need for it.
There's definitely not.
But there's been dumber movies made with less need before. So I'm looking at like the 12 Transformer sequels, you know, at least this is like someone's story that comes from like a stupid YouTube short, basically.
It's got an interesting origin, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that's what excites me about it more so than, you know, the premise itself. Cause I've seen the short. It's funny. I like it. It's way up my alley, but
yeah,
you know, it's
the short is what, 12 minutes long or something?
Well, the original short was like 3 minutes, and then they made like an extended one that's like 30 minutes on Netflix. But you know, that's like 20 minutes probably worth of story. The rest of it's just like credits and shit like that. But no, it's,
I personally think of that 30-minute version, they could shave, you know, 26 to 28 of the minutes, but.
Well, then you just go back and watch the original, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
No, my favorite part definitely is just when he time travels to the past and there's like a laser raptor and then there's Thor and Vikings have machine guns. That part's like what I like.
Yeah.
The rest of it's funny, but like that's Max stuff right there. So
we'll see what they do with it.
Yeah, for sure. But no, that's pretty much what's been on my plate this week. Just reading, reading movie news and watching the Olympics.
There you go. I have watched a couple things, but most notable is what?
Oh, I was gonna say most. Like I'm agreeing with you. Like I'm super excited to hear this.
Oh, Black Panther, the newest Marvel movie from director Ryan Coogler, Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, and of course Michael B. Jordan coming in as a villain. I'm not gonna spoil anything. I'm just gonna say that I fucking loved it. It was really good. Just start to finish. It's one of my 3 favorite Marvel movies of the cinematic universe, because Spider-Man 2 still exists above all, in my opinion.
Which one?
Spider-Man 2.
Oh, of the Marvel cinematic. I got you. I got you.
Okay. But no, it's really good. Everybody who's listening, if they haven't seen it, should see it. It set a bunch of it's the second highest grossing movie on Thursday previews of all time, behind
nice.
Avengers Age of Ultron. Yeah. It's on pace to do really well. I think a top 10 projected opening weekend finish of all time. It was a cool experience to see it in a packed out theater on Thursday night when I saw it.
That's awesome.
I know you haven't gotten a chance, but you will this weekend probably. So.
I believe so. That's my goal.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Once you see it, we can talk about it a little more.
Maybe
give our listeners a chance.
If we can, if we both love it that much, we could even, spend a little time on it. Dedicate more than just our normal discussion. We'll see.
Yeah.
We could either do some blogs, or we could do some episode breakdown. We'll figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. But speaking of greater plans, this is our 100th episode, man.
It is. Congratulations, Scootsy.
Hey, congratulations to you, my man.
Thanks, bud.
All right, let's not dwell on that.
Well, but we should dwell on it for just a brief second.
Okay.
Pause. Do we want to discuss that we'll have more votes coming up? We don't have to go into super detail if we don't want to, but we just say it.
Nah, we don't need to, because we got a lot of action on these polls.
Yeah.
With no warning, so.
That's true.
We can just leave that, and then when we after our 89% episode, we should do like a FB Live or a video or something.
Yeah.
Talking about it.
Word, brother.
Yeah.
All right. So 100 episodes, man. That's good stuff. That's 100 weeks, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Some of them were just interludes, but they still count in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so.
You still had to edit them,
Yeah, still took some work.
Still took some work. So here's to 100 more. Am I right?
Yeah, let's
Am I
do
right,
it, man.
ladies?
Another hundo.
Another hundo. I think Inception's a good movie to talk about on the 100th episode.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, we had 4 good options, and we went with a good one here because you guys decided it. So
we didn't go with a good one. They went with a good one.
They went with a good one. Yeah, it's a good movie because it's entertaining.
Yeah.
It's well paced and well made. You get something out of it when you watch it multiple times. Like we caught a bunch of lines at the beginning this time that we were like, "Whoa, that's cool."
Yeah, we're like, "Oh."
And
you don't like trains, of course.
Yeah. And I think I know I saw this one like opening week or something, and I think I went back a second time at least.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it since then.
I think it's so for me too. I can't remember watching it again.
Yeah.
But no, this is a good experience. It's like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something, but it flies by.
It really does. And the pacing of this movie, I mean, it's just brilliant, really, because you're playing with 3 different timelines in a sense. It's like a timeline within a timeline within a timeline. So it paces things really well, and you know exactly when things are going to happen in theory. And
they basically explain the whole time, this is going to happen in 3 minutes, this is going to happen in an hour, and stuff like that. So you know.
Exactly. And it's great because then it goes wrong like the entire time.
Every step of the way.
Which is like, very competent filmmaking, basically. You want to set up issues that your characters are either equipped or not equipped to handle, and then you want to mess it up and see how they fix it,
Sure.
Because, obviously Cobb is the best. Except he has this he's the best at his job, but he has this issue that's blocking him, which is the projection of his wife.
Yep.
So, in theory, if he didn't have that, he could fix it. So already you're starting with this good flaw of this character.
He's a flawed character.
And then every character you meet basically is either very good but has like one kind of like small flaw that kind of rounds them out, or is like new to the situation, which in itself counts, So like with what is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character? Is that Arthur?
Yeah.
Arthur's very good at what he does, but he has no imagination, to quote your impression of Eames. I didn't quote the full thing, but
he has to think bigger.
Yeah. And then Eames is like very eccentric, thinks very big, but he also is kind of sloppy in his work, So it's a good balance of characters, I think. If you're gonna do like a movie that really just has a couple main characters, but you want an ensemble, like full realistic feeling cast, this is the way to do it. So it's still like one guy's story kind of with a couple other
everyone
major
else
players,
is ancillary to that.
Exactly.
Story.
Yeah. So you care enough about all the other stories though. So it's well done, man. Apparently it took Christopher Nolan 10 years to write this script.
Well, I heard that not the writing part, but just he pitched it to studio after studio and everyone turned him away. Probably because trying to explain this movie in a minute would be hard. But okay, so they're in the dream. From there, they're in another dream. Like, okay, Chris.
They just
back to Batman. They
keep dreaming. Apparently, I think he first pitched the movie after Memento, maybe? Or Insomnia. It was after Insomnia.
Yeah.
And the studios were like, do some more work on it because we need to see more of this before we agree to it. But he just knew like going for the Batmans was easier. It's kind of like he's had a lot of these ideas actually. Like I think didn't we discuss on The Prestige that one was an idea he sat on for a little bit?
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
I'll have to listen to our episode again to confirm, but he does a lot of creative ideas like this. Like Memento is obviously a very unique and memorable film. The Prestige, same way. Inception, they're very deep and heady. Interstellar as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I personally don't like Interstellar as much, but it's
love.
And it's undeniably a unique idea. And I think particularly The Dark Knight, but with this whole backlog, especially with the Batman series, he built enough of like a cachet that studios just trust him.
Yeah.
And like Dunkirk is a good film. it doesn't have the same. It's very different from the rest of his films because Inception, The Prestige, Interstellar, they're all very character-driven films. Dunkirk feels very impersonal in comparison because the characters honestly aren't really all that important.
Yeah.
They don't stand out in the same way that the characters stand out here, and that's just because the real character of Dunkirk is the event. And I know that doesn't make much sense, but
I get what you're saying. It's about a specific time. I haven't seen it yet. Still, I'm going to try and rent it soon, but
it's really good.
It's a specific time, and it's about the event more so.
Exactly.
So I get what you're saying. Like it's not this, which is all fictional. It's actually this exists in a time that is the future, but is never said when, and it's so modern that it's not the future. You know?
Yeah.
It's great science fiction because it's very speculative. And one thing that they say that's always good with science fiction is if you keep like everything the same but change one thing. You know, like this technology was invented by the military to help people learn how to kill.
Yeah.
And then everything else formed out of it. And I mean, so that could be it was developed in the 60s. That could be it was developed last year. Like they don't have to say.
Right.
And that's great. I mean, that's honestly like how you kind of want to do this. If you're going to do like a modern-ish, futuristic-ish thriller, that's the way to do it.
Plus, the everything about the whole dreamscape and all that is pretty unrealistic.
Yeah.
But they start you off in that level already, and then from there they just explain it as they go.
Yeah.
And you just accept everything about it. You're like, yeah, of course that guy's subconscious fills your dream.
Yeah.
That's how it works, Ariadne.
And also it's like you realize there's enough truth in that statement because anytime you've dreamed, you realize the same thing has happened to you, you know?
Yeah, it is relatable too, like with the kick, that feeling of falling. It's like we've all felt that.
Yeah. Like Jody was actually like, that's how I wake up every day. Like that's how we all wake up every day, kind of. If you're dreaming.
Startled awake.
Yeah. Just, you know, bed of sweat. Just ask yourself what went wrong.
Screaming. Oh, my wife.
But no, you know, this is it's just such a cool concept, I think. Like you can't watch this movie and not smile at certain things. It's just super fun.
For sure. I mean, it never gets too serious too. Like there's serious stuff that goes on, but it always stays fun enough. One thing I like with the whole dream concept of going into the dreams and having an architect build the levels and stuff, and I mentioned it to you, they can do whatever they want. They can be wherever they want with these dreams. So it keeps things fresh. It's like how James Bond is fun because it's a globe-trotting spy movie.
Yep.
This is a globe-trotting heist movie because they start off in New York City, and then they're in a swanky hotel, and then they're in a snowy mountain, and then they're on this like crazy illogical island. Like they can be wherever they could have been in a lava planet. Like they could have done whatever they want.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
That is very cool. And it really does kind of like add depth to the film too, because like visually you have all these different styles going on. I think you mentioned that too at one point when we watched it, just like this is so cool how like, you know, boom, they're just in a snowy spot. And they get to go big, and even the characters themselves like kind of notice it, because at one point that I laughed a lot at the line like, can't you dream of a beach next time? Like those lines they add a lot, because you're like, you know, I'm thinking the same thing. Like, why'd you dream of this? Which it actually does have explanation, because they themselves said, you know, you got to create a world that's realistic, but it also has to be a maze at the same time.
Yeah, so all the worlds they build are like secretly labyrinths.
Yeah.
But the heist crew is like as cool as possible here.
Oh, yeah.
Like even your targets, there's like two targets in the movie. Saito at the start and Ken Watanabe is undeniably cool.
Yeah.
And then the target is Robert Fisher for the most of the movie, and it's Cillian Murphy, and he's undeniably cool.
Yeah.
So those guys who could easily be just like dopes because they're getting fooled and stuff, they're still very cool actors and cool characters.
Yeah.
So that line, like you mentioned, like why couldn't it be an island? That's Robert Fisher who says it. That's Cillian Murphy. So it's just like, it's so cool. And then of course you fill it with Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy. Like these guys literally couldn't be cooler. You couldn't make a change to the cast that would make it cooler.
And one thing that's unique with this film too, using those really good actors. Usually movies don't use their actors well enough, and that's That was actually one of the reasons Nolan brought Watanabe into this.
Is that how you pronounce it? I pronounced it wrong earlier.
I actually don't really know. Is what Watanabe? It might be Watanabe.
That's what I said. No offense meant, Kenneth.
Yeah. One of the reasons you bring him in is because he is an amazing actor, you know. But then what was it? Batman Begins. He had a small part. It wasn't that big.
He did?
Yeah, he was. I'm pretty sure he was who he thought Ra's al Ghul was. He's in one of the Batman Nolan films, and I think it was Batman Begins.
That sounds right.
Because he thought he was, you know, someone else, but he's actually Liam Neeson.
Yeah,
Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul, and Ra's al Ghul, however you say it. I'm saying it from the cartoon, but
yeah, you're good, man.
But yeah, so Nolan felt he didn't give him enough to do as an actor in that movie, so he wanted to bring him back. So the role was like written specifically for him, which is awesome. And he's definitely, like, as far as swagger, he wins this film, I think. Well, him and Eames kind of share it.
I don't know, but I think Arthur had a ton of swagger. Just because Joseph Gordon-Levitt with the slick back hair, with the suits, you know, he's so cool.
No, that's true. I think, and
he kind of gets the girl, like, not really, but
it's like they. I guess all three just have like a shit ton of swagger, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so does Leonardo DiCaprio. He's just like a broken man.
Yeah,
he's a little out of the running.
Yeah, you can tell he had swagger though.
Yeah, Eames does have that. Like every scene he's in is cool. Like when you meet him, he's like hustling a poker game in like Casablanca or something.
Yeah, Mombasa.
In Mombasa. Like every part that he's in is cool. So,
and that was kind of like. People, because we were talking about Tom Hardy afterwards. Just like when did he really get big? Besides Bane, everyone knows him as Bane, but this was before that.
Yeah.
And so it's just like this is like that Tom Hardy moment where people are like, that guy was cool.
Yeah, like that guy can have my babies.
Yeah. Like that dude is what's up.
He did have a very small role in Band of Brothers, which I know you haven't seen all of, but the book Band of Brothers is mostly derived from one of the soldiers kept like really good diaries, Private Christensen, and Tom Hardy plays Private Christensen in the show.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny.
I did point out he also played a Picard clone at one point on Star Trek Nemesis.
Was Nemesis was a movie or was that
it was a movie? It was the last Next Generation movie.
Is that one considered a good one? I know that they're all over the map. Okay.
Definitely not.
Is that the one with the whale?
No, definitely not that one either. That one's, I believe, the fourth one, The Voyage Home. And that one is the original cast.
We could do an episode where you just like try to explain Star Trek to me, and then I try and explain Star Trek to someone else.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. Star Trek telephone. Write that down.
You just explain to me why you like Into Darkness. And then we go back and forth.
It's just a fun movie.
There we go. Episode's over.
We talked about how successful Inception was. Let's talk those box office numbers. Let's get real literal with how successful it was.
Yeah, let's do it.
10 years of pitching got Christopher Nolan a $160 million budget.
Nice.
That's a big boy.
It is.
Domestically, a $292.6 million domestic total, which is pretty high.
Yeah.
$828 million worldwide, which is even higher.
Yeah.
The domestic run was at number 78 of all time. So that's pretty good.
Do you think the studios at this point were like, yeah, Nolan, you can make your movies?
Yeah,
like, do you think this was the one that did that?
This was after The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is probably the one that gave him that reputation, and this was the first time it paid off, I would say. Because The Dark Knight, I mean, superhero movies were barely taken seriously up until that point. Like, The Dark Knight got Oscar love, and people, it didn't get nominated for Best Picture, but people were up in arms about that, I remember.
And people were also arguing that it only got nominated because of Heath Ledger's death for stuff, you know, like, and I think a lot of people who paid attention to Nolan's career were like, no, like, I mean, that's definitely, he did a great performance. It's not just because he died, but like the movie itself is good.
The movie itself's great, and this guy's got a history of doing great movies. So I think that's the one that really set him up. And Inception was the first time we saw, okay, Nolan, do what you want. And now he's one of those directors where he can do whatever you want. Like, if Christopher Nolan, like one of the modern masters of original science fiction, comes up to Warner Brothers and they're like, okay, Chris, what are we doing next? Are we doing something like deep space? Are we doing like something crazy? He's like, no, I'm going to do a World War II drama.
Yeah.
He's big enough that they're just like, okay.
Yeah, and it might even be really like, it might be like, you did this World War II drama, and we finally get that James Bond movie we want from you, right? And
we'll see.
So it might be something like that, is what I'm saying. But
yeah.
Even then, it's like anything they get out of Christopher Nolan, they're gonna be like, yeah, that's great, let's do that.
Because he has such a track record.
Exactly. Yeah.
But this opened in July 16th, 2010. I know I was in the theater on that day. 62.8 million, which sounds kind of small. When you compare it to now, these like Marvel movies they're opening in like the 160 millions, but
yeah.
I feel like this was still pretty high for 2010. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean it does seem like that. I think the Marvel, Disney, Star Wars alliance is gonna like make these numbers even crazier as time goes on, but
for sure.
No, I mean, but that's the thing with Nolan is, like, since he's become a name, since Batman, I mean, he does deliver, like you said.
Yeah.
He's good at it.
Even before he became a name. I mean, we talked The Prestige.
That's
that
true.
was after Batman Begins, but Christopher Nolan's not a household name when The Prestige came out.
Yeah.
And before that, Memento, Insomnia, like, they're good movies.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Movies. Even his original film, which I believe was a student film, Following, have you ever watched it?
I have not.
It's, I mean, it's very limited in its scope because it's a student film, but it's just good. You can see his vision.
That's cool.
In it, and it's original, so.
Yeah. And
that's what I like about Nolan. He's never, like, sure, the Dark Knight trilogy is based on the Batman works, but they're still very definitively Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
And he never really shies away from his style. Just like the same reasons why we love M. Night Shyamalan. Christopher Nolan's a little more traditional, maybe, but he still does these incredible movies.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean he does like thrilling moments very well. He knows how to build tension. He knows how to make a story that you're instantly going to identify with, even in these weird worlds and settings that you're not used to necessarily. Like you mentioned, this one does exposition really well, and then also just really like obviously exposition, but at the same time, like it all works,
So there was a couple lines, and I'm not talking big parts of the script, but a couple individual lines where it just felt very unnatural. Like the one that stands out to me in the first dream that they're in, Arthur is being held at gunpoint by Mal, who is Leonardo DiCaprio's wife,
is it
Mary
Mal
Cotillard.
or Mal?
Mal, I'm sorry, Mal. Yeah. Mal is a man's name. Mal is holding Arthur at gunpoint, and there's an exchange where Cobb is just like, oh, well, that's not a good threat, because if you die in your dream, you just wake up. And then she's like, well, it depends on the threat. If I threaten to kill, he'll wake up, but pain is still in the mind and can be, like, the way it was all explained, just like, it's super unnatural, because all those characters would know what's happening. There'd be no need to explain that.
I think watching it now that we've seen it, it sticks out more. But when you first see the movie, I would probably argue that you're like, okay.
Oh, no. It definitely is like necessary for the viewer. Like that information is necessary for the viewer, but I think there could have been a more natural way to tell. Like they're explaining a lot of things to Saito like later on.
Yeah.
They could have included that in the explanation to Saito, because that exposition is natural. Yeah. Because that Saito doesn't know what's happening. Yeah. And he needs those things explained. And that's the nice way to do that kind of exposition. I mean,
jumping off that, even then, the moment could have still happened there, but it could have happened to her explaining it to Saito.
Yeah.
Like, just
or he could have been, or he could have been shot and like screaming, and then when they wake up, Saito's like, I thought when you died, you just woke up, like nothing happened, and then they could be like, oh well, he wasn't dying. You can feel pain. Pain's all in the mind, like that kind of thing. But it's a small nitpick.
No, I get you. I get you.
Especially this film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including its screenplay, best original screenplay.
That's good. Yeah.
And so those are little things that I think hold it back. Whereas I think The Prestige does a good job of the exposition that it has is all very natural. It's in explaining something to a character who doesn't know it, or it's showing something to a child.
Yeah.
So it's all very natural. And this one doesn't succeed at the same level as The Prestige. But it's still a really good movie.
Oh, yeah,
Like
totally.
comparing a movie to The Prestige is like, I mean, it's one of my favorite movies. So
You like that one better than this one?
I think I do like The Prestige better than
Yeah.
this one. They're both really good.
Yeah.
I love a heist movie though, and Inception at its core, even with all the dream stuff, it's still a heist movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there's just really satisfying action sequences, like the opening scene with where they're within Saito's dreams, and then they're within that second layer dream that looks like it's just like a Spanish village, and the villagers are like storming the apartment that they're in. Yeah. That's just a really cool scene. You don't really know what's happening, but you know that it's intense because there's an angry mob approaching them.
Yeah.
And it ends up really cool. And then the chase through Mombasa was really cool. There's moments in it that just give you anxiety, like when Cobb is trying to push through those two buildings that are too close together. It's just like it makes my skin crawl watching it. And
there's also this cool thing that they do where, and I noticed it happening with Jodie at that point when we were watching it, you don't know at certain points at the beginning of the film like what's a dream anymore and what's real, which becomes important for the totem. Because there are certain points where Jodie was like, I bet you this is a dream. And it's not. You know, she's like, oh, okay. But you start to wonder because you're like, oh, well, there's a riot going on there. Or you're like, oh, you're running through this cafe. Like, I don't know. It just, you're squeezing between two buildings. You're waiting for something to happen and it doesn't. But it's a great way to build tension because you're just like, okay, I really don't know. You know, I can kind of figure it out. Exactly. Yeah. It's another layer of just kind of what if. And then when you bring in the totems later, it explains like where they are for real, so you can get rid of that confusion. But it adds well to the whole like theme and feel of the movie.
Yeah, and one of the cool things that the movie does is there's all these rules, like, and there's these terms that are just accepted, like totem.
Yeah,
they say what a totem is, and because it has a name, it feels like realer. And like the kick and stuff like that, like all those things have their own names, so they feel real. Yeah. And then they all have rules. It's like, oh, you can't let anyone touch your totem because that's your way of knowing if you're in the dream or not. So, Max, what would your totem be? The famous one is, of course, the spinning top, which in a dream doesn't fall, but in real life it falls because that's what tops do. Arthur's was a loaded die that will always roll to a certain thing. Someone had like a chess piece totem, which I didn't even understand how that one worked.
Yeah.
It was like he knocked it over, and there's like, okay, it works. Maybe in the dream it's like a Weeble. You can't knock it over. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
Yeah, see, I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I like the dice idea, but I don't want to steal Arthur's idea.
You can't steal Arthur's idea.
Like, if I did a D20, would that work?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe, let's see.
I told you mine yesterday, and I'm changing it a little bit. Mine would be a mini keyboard where one of the keys was out of tune.
Yeah.
And only I would know which one. So the thing they make a big deal about is, oh, you can't touch someone else's totem. No one can know what it does because then it kind of ruins the whole idea of it. And by the end of the movie, I realize at least that the whole core conflict to Cobb's character about his wife dying, it honestly could have just been because he knew what her totem did. And he set her up with this thought in her head that then made her go crazy, basically think everything's a dream.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that rule, like the don't touch anyone else's totem, was in place before that. You know?
Maybe.
Because Arthur's the one who says it, and maybe Cobb just said it's Arthur. Arthur's a follower. So, but Arthur also doesn't know everything that happened with Cobb and with Maul. So,
there is one theory about Cobb's totems.
Oh, I heard. Is it the wedding ring one?
No, well, that might be one. There's a bunch of theories, basically. There's a couple theories based around that the top actually isn't his totem. It's almost like, I don't know if this part would be true, but I've also heard theories that, like, you know, the top ensures that he still has access to her in his head. You know, like it kind of represents that, but that his totem would actually be his children, and that he can't look at them until he knows that they're real, because that would kind of like they're his children, but he can never see them, is basically like the totem theory. I've heard that as a theory.
If he sees his children, he knows he's in a dream?
No, if he sees their face, then that's reality. And so he doesn't let them look at him, or he doesn't make contact with them until the final scene, because he accepts that as reality. like I said, it's all film theory, not
Yeah, and that
stuff,
doesn't
but...
that kind of goes against the concept of the totem because he's choosing whether or not to look them in the face.
Well, it's just like an imperfect representation of his children,
Yeah.
basically, because he can never see them, never touch them, never call out to them. Is the discussion? But like I said, I mean, to me, it's the top because they say it's the top.
Yeah, the one I've heard is like the wedding ring is his totem because he's wearing his wedding ring or he's not wearing his wedding ring during all the dreams or vice versa. I can't remember. When we started watching, I was like, I'm going to pay attention and see if there's anything there. And within minutes, I just stopped.
Yeah. For me, that one doesn't really make as much sense either, just because like they don't draw attention to it.
Yeah.
So much that like it really, you would have to go to your way to notice it so much that it would like detract from the film.
In fairness, Nolan does deceive quite a bit in his filmmaking. So if there was a little thing like that, it wouldn't like surprise me too much, but it does. Like, I feel like we can take this at face value that the totem, his totem is his wife's top. So let's talk about the whole plot with Maul, because I think it is pretty tragic, and I forgot the true ending of it until we watched it again. Maul and Cobb, basically the history is they went into limbo, which is like super dream state where I think they call it unstructured dreamscape or something like that. You can just like time moves at like a millionth of its speed, and you can just build and create and destroy, do whatever you want. They're down there for decades.
And their idea was they can basically create their own world for as long as they want, be together, grow old together there. Yeah, and then come back whenever they want. The problem that started there was at first neither of them wanted to come back. They were fine with just being there.
Yeah.
Just together, just creating their own world. It was enough for both of them. And then over time, Cobb realized like, hey, I kind of want to see like my real kids. I want to, just go back to the normal world. Yeah,
let's wake up.
And so they're so far down in the dreamscape that they're basically dream within a dream within a dream. Just like infinitely, I guess. But he goes and finds where she keeps her totem within her mind.
Because Maul isn't like accepting it.
Yeah.
She's like, this is the real world.
Yeah. And she's just like, we're fine here. This is great. Like, we can do everything. The kids are here. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Because they have, since we mentioned earlier that there's projections in your mind, you can project somebody from your subconscious just like you do in real life when you dream, and it feels real, So that's
you only can do that. You like everybody that fills the dream is someone that you've seen or like passed before, because your mind can't make up its own like images of people, basically.
But I mean, within the plot, though, they do specifically say, like, someone like literally can show up being themselves, like acting the same way how they normally would. So she felt very satisfied with everything, was cool with it, and he wanted to go back. So he put this idea. He finds her totem and he puts this idea in her head by changing the totem, making it, changing its spin or whatever to make her doubt the reality of existence.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happens, she accepts that they need to wake up and leave. They do this weird train suicide thing and then wake up back in the real world. I guess they didn't want to kill each other, but they wanted something unstoppable. So they went with that, and then he made the mistake of saying your world isn't real. Yeah,
so the whole idea with Inception throughout the movie is putting an idea in someone else's head. They explain without going into detail, like Cobb says, like, I've done Inception before and all this, but you don't know what it is until the end. And one of the ideas of it is you have to make the idea as simple as possible.
Yeah.
So his version of that simple idea is your world isn't real, which wakes her out of the limbo, but then they get back to the real world and the idea is still in her head.
Yeah.
She still thinks they're dreaming, and she's basically mentally ill at that point. And it ends up with her killing herself and wanting Cobb to also kill himself to wake up and go back to their real kids, to their real world.
Yeah.
It's a very tragic scene.
And she creates a situation that really his only way out would be to kill himself.
Yeah, she
talked to 3 doctors to prove that she was sane. She left a letter saying she fears for her safety from him, and she thinks he's going to try and kill her. Then she destroys their hotel room to make it look like a fight happened.
Yep. And so then she jumps. Cobb doesn't because he's
Yeah.
of sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically not allowed to go back home anymore.
Yeah.
They show just in some like brief little vignettes that he had to flee and he's not allowed back in the country. He can't see his kids anymore, stuff like that. So that kind of all builds into Cobb's story, and it ends up playing out in our Inception heist of Robert Fisher, where Maul from Cobb's subconscious keeps coming in and ruining their plans, basically.
Yeah.
So it plays out in right at the end. They're like 3 levels deep in the dream. Robert Fisher's about to go. Their whole plan there, we don't have to go into too much detail there, but Saito wants Robert Fisher to break up his father's oil empire or whatever it was. And the idea that they're planting is that Robert's father doesn't want Maurice, that was his name. Maurice doesn't want wants his son to build his own life or whatever. Don't just hang on his laurels. So he's about to go get that reveal, and then Maul shows up and shoots him. So then they have to go into limbo on purpose and get Fisher out, and then Saito dies. So Cobb stays, and it's complex, but it makes sense when you're watching it. Like, it all plays out in a way that makes sense. It's harder to explain it like this than it is to just watch it.
And there's a lot of things I really like in this like limbo portion. I like that the kick with Robert Fisher was just tossing them out the window, basically.
yeah.
And I like how they timed it. That whole kick sequence, like each layer is amazing, and you started laughing because you were like, in any other movie that wouldn't make sense. They say, when we feel the kick, we'll just ride up the layers back to the real world.
We'll ride the layers back up to the real world.
And you were just like, honestly, out of context, no sense is made there. But but no, and
but when you're watching the movie, you're like, fuck yeah, of course that's like, what we're gonna do.
It makes perfect sense. But no, what I really love is in that portion, he finally addresses his mistakes. He's saying goodbye to his brain projection of her, and basically saying, like, I know you're not real because the real you was like literal perfection to me. Yeah. Like, because you were imperfect, and nothing I create in my head can replicate that. And it was just like super sweet. And I feel like that's the thing that always kind of alerts you when you're dreaming is, when you kind of start to realize things are either too perfect or not imperfect enough. Like there's this weird zone. And so I really like that. And then I really like when him and Saito reconnect in limbo.
Yeah.
And you can tell Saito's been there for
decades. They've been there for a long time. Yeah. And the thing that the one weird concept is the stretching of time. At limbo, it makes the least sense because like it kind of makes sense in the real dream levels, and in limbo, it's just like fucking nonsense.
Yeah.
But yeah, Saito is a very old man, and
it's just
they meet each other. They say like a quote to each other that they had said earlier in the movie.
Yeah. And
so they know what they have to do, and then they can finish each other off and boogie.
Yeah. And no, it's cool because you don't like, even then when they're discussing at the very end, you're hoping, because he's like, he gives an idea to Saito right there, and he just says, this world isn't real.
Yeah.
And then they show them like with the gun, but then it just cuts to them waking up, basically.
Yeah, you don't need to see the murder suit. Like.
Yeah, exactly. And so then when they wake up, you could tell everything's right. Like, everything worked, basically.
Everyone else had been awake already.
Yeah.
They give Leo knowing smirks.
And the waking up scene I really liked, actually. Like I said, when you ride the kick up and it shows like Ellen Page going through each level, waking up again. Yeah. It's super fun. It's a good payoff for everything.
For sure. And we haven't even talked about the coolest action sequence of the movie is in Dream Layer 2, Arthur's dream, where they're all sleeping in a van that is careening off a cliff. Mm-hmm. And there's this hotel action scene where as the van is tumbling like down a hill before it careens off a cliff, Gordon Levitt is fighting like some goon in a rotating hallway. And it's a very famous scene now.
Yeah.
Because they didn't use green screen. They built this apparatus that was the hallway and they tumbled it around. And it works so much to the film's benefit because when it's green screen, you can't even really show the action. in that sense, it would look so weird and unnatural.
Yeah.
But this was real. Everything was falling in the way it would fall. There's no computer artists really involved, and it's just such a satisfying action sequence.
Yeah, and what I really like is the whole thing is we talked about Eames wants him to dream bigger, to think more like off the cuff and be more improvisational. And so his whole sequence goes to shit like immediately. Like
so when the van is free falling, that means he missed the first kick. The first kick was it like hitting the barrier, but it goes through the barrier and is falling. Then he has no gravity.
Yeah.
So you can't do a kick when there's no gravity. So he has to channel Eames's inner monologue in his head. Probably here's the like, you have to think bigger. Yeah. Bigger. So he does this whole thing where he has them all in the elevator, and he uses C4 to like blow it up, and
because originally the C4 was to blow up the floor beneath them and let them all drop. And now he had to change it to blow up an elevator to move something, because that system lets you like drop basically. To use the explosion to like kick them that way. So it was just fun to see him like work through the situation and think big, finally, like dream big. And it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt, so he looks cool as hell.
He looks fucking cool doing it.
The sequence, even then, it's like it's hard for him to swim through the air because no gravity and get through everything. And then he moves like a cabinet, and there's one more guy there, which is, like I said, you always have to have these barriers they have to get across because everything always goes wrong. I do like the rule that the quote, I think Arthur says it at one point to Ariadne earlier, that have you noticed Cobb gives you all these rules and then immediately breaks them? Which is that's always fun for me to see in a movie when it's very rules based, because it's going to go to shit. And I kind of like that half of it goes to shit because of Cobb, and then half of it's just because things are happening. So for sure.
No, it's just a very satisfying action movie. Like, even if you like, people can get lost in all the science and the like. There's things that don't make sense to me with some of the science of it. Like, they're waiting for these kicks, but they can also just like kill themselves to get out of that level. And I don't fully understand why they were waiting for the kicks.
I think the reason was the what is it called? That's the sedative affected everything except your inner ear, so you can hear things still through the different levels, and so your equilibrium is also like still open. So that's why they were feeling gravity. That's why they would hear noises. But the sedative was so strong that the death kick wouldn't work.
That's right. That's right.
So you'd get lost, which is what happens to Saito. You'd get lost if you didn't get woken up beforehand.
Yeah. So you can get lost in those details, or you could just kind of take it at face value as just a really fucking cool action movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the right way to do it.
Oh, for sure. I say, watch it, enjoy it. Then when you dip in further watches, then you can like tear it apart, kind of like we were doing, like, just really chew on it. But at the same time, just watch it, enjoy it. Like,
yeah, man,
good
for
shit.
Sure. So which do you prefer, this or The Prestige?
I think story-wise, I still probably prefer The Prestige, but just like entertainment value, I mean, I think this one wins because it's just a very exciting thriller movie.
Yeah, and the spectacle of this one is a lot greater. The Prestige is a much better personal story with a smaller cast and everything. This has really good characters, and Cobb's story is, in the end, very tragic and everything. Yeah. And very satisfying. But the everything around it, I think, is a little better in Inception. But I really like the personal story of The Prestige better. The 4 Oscars that it won, by the way, were cinematography, visual effects, sound, and sound editing. I wasn't particularly blown away by the cinematography watching it. The visual effects, for sure. But I can't remember, like, when I think of great cinematography, I just think of, like, Blade Runner 2049, which is just filled with these shots that are just, like, amazing. And Inception doesn't have that same level to me.
So I've seen this come up with different movies. And I think for me, the thing with cinematography is it needs to fit the feel of the film. And for me, like, I never once questioned, because cinematography isn't just shots. It's the whole thing. It's the whole composition, the whole artistic vision put together. And I think for me, this one, the cinematography is really good because there aren't necessarily like cool shots based on the camera, but there are like really well thought out placed.
Oh yeah, everything's put together like correctly and in a good way.
Like the framing, it all works. I don't know, the slow motion every time they're going through a kick, like that works really well. The different levels feel different. There's definitely like different, and I mean that's everything combined. That's writing, that's direction, but cinematography I think does play a big key in that. So while it's, I was just saying the other week about sound design to someone, which is a stupid sentence, but sometimes the less you notice, the better something is. And
and that's Roger Deakins has like a famous quote. It's probably not famous, but I know it, where he says like, "Good cinematography you don't notice because you're just in the film." And Inception does do that well. And
so I think it's always better to do that. That's some straight geeking on film right there, Scott. But
thank you.
Yeah, so you know, like a good movie can have those really cool stylish shots, and I'm not going to complain when they do. But at the same time, a good movie should also just the focus be the story itself. So sometimes the shots just play to that. So
for sure. My favorite shots in this movie are when Eames is like becoming I don't remember the character's name, but like Maurice Fisher's longtime assistant who they used to like
Uncle
kind
Paul.
of extort Uncle Paul, whatever it was. Some of the scenes have him like in front of a few mirrors, and in some of the reflections, it's that the actor that actually plays the assistant, and in some of them it's Tom Hardy, and it's just really fucking cool.
Yeah, it is cool. They do a good job with all that, because you know who it is the whole time.
Yeah.
Whenever it's him, but then also in different levels, you start to wonder, is that? And then
and then they introduce the subconscious projection as well, so you have to question it.
And then also when he's playing in the Mr. Charles area, when he's playing the female played by Tallulah Riley. Tallulah Riley. I have a hard time saying her name. But yeah, like, it's he can do female mannerisms. It's actually really funny. So when he's switching back and forth for like a brief second, it's funny in the elevator with the mirrors. Yeah, I mean, all that stuff is cool, man.
It's very cool. Very, very cool. It's just a cool movie. This is the coolest movie we've watched.
For sure. Slickest, rawest. I mean, it's up there.
It's the neatest for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any more thoughts on Inception, buddy? Why did I just call you buddy?
I don't know. I was fine with it. I really like Pete Postlethwaite. Rest in peace. I'm always excited when he's in a movie because he plays these good character bits.
He was really good in The Town.
Yeah. God. I think the first thing I always remember him in, which I still don't think you've seen, which is fine, is probably Dragonheart.
I haven't seen Dragonheart.
And he's like an amazing, just like weird cleric-y monk type of person in that. But he's in The Lost World. He's in The Usual Suspects. He's like in everything.
He is in The Usual Suspects.
Yeah, and I mean he's up until he passed. I mean he was one of those guys. He was in Romeo and Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann one.
Okay.
Like he's just in tons of shit, and he's just one of those actors that I like a lot. Wish that he was still with us, but it's good to see him when he shows up.
Yeah, I mean he had a long career, long life. So. Max, where can the good people find us?
You can find us in Mombasa, getting the strongest sedatives you can find. Or you can find us at thecriticalbreakdown.com. Find us on Twitter. Just in case we run another poll, you want to be able to access it. We're Breakdowncast on Twitter. You can find me trying to spit game at Tallulah Riley, who might actually be Tom Hardy, but I'm still spitting game. Or you can find me on Twitter at Max Rivera Film. Just a brief mention, I did a call-in to another podcast called the Psychotronic Film Society, and they do kind of genre films, and I just had a brief snippet in there, but it's a fun episode. They're doing their best of 2017. So if you want to hear me just have a brief dip in and hear some other guys geeking on film, check that out. For
sure. You can find me and Ellen Page designing our own mazes, or you can find me at breakdown_Scott on Instagram. I will admit I did reset my Twitter password, but I have no intention of really using it, so let's stick to Instagram for me. We have a new email address.
Yes, we do.
I don't know it.
It is podcast at thecriticalbreakdown.com.
That is a lot smoother.
Yeah.
That's like a cappuccino from your favorite local coffee shop. Nice and smooth.
It is. As we continue going through 2018, we're trying to just get our web game up there, you know?
Yeah.
100 episodes. It's time to be a 100 episode podcast. So.
Time to get a new email address.
Yeah. We've promised it for about 80 episodes.
The other one did us good for 99 episodes, but for the centennial, we're going to do a new one. So you know what? Everybody send us a test email to podcast@thecriticalbreakdown.com to make sure that it's working. And thank you in advance for doing that.
And tell us the most cinematic dream you've ever had.
All of my dreams are very cinematic, and it's really stupid, but I always dream like that I'm in Hogwarts or something.
Here's that.
And I'm always a background character.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've dreamed of Survivor before, but you don't win.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing about Scott dreams. My dreams, I explained one to you the other day, and you were just like...
Thanks for bringing that up, dude.
Sorry, dude. But I explained my dream to you, and you were just like, I'm going to be honest, I don't really understand what's happening.
Yeah, your dreams make no fucking sense.
They make sense to me.
That's another episode, though. The Max Dream episode. Our art is done by Josh Rivera.
Music's done by Jason Brown.
Fart is done by Wally the podcast dog.
And the dreams are done by the podcast boys.
Next week on The Critical Breakdown.
Book your room because we're staying with The Shining, rated 87% on Rotten Tomatoes.
All work and no pod makes Max a dull boy.